Good afternoon and welcome to a special edition of Community. We are delighted to have you join us today. We have a very special guest, going to learn a lot to prepare us for hurricane season.
Yes.
But before we bring in our guest, we want to start with Portia. She's going to give us some announcements and just go over a few things. Also, we will not have our weekly, regularly scheduled show on Wednesday. So this will be the only episode this week.
Yes. All right. So, hi, everybody. As always, I'm so happy to be here with you. Always start off with this. We are the NAACP Houston branch. We are one unit out of over 2,000 units of the NAACP National Association. So, we are powered through membership, powered through volunteers, and we need you. We need you here in Houston, and we need you all across the United States. So, if you happen to be here in the Houston area, we would love for you to join. July's going to pin the membership link in the comments, but it's $30 for a 1 year membership. So if you join today on July 7th of 2020, you'll be a member for 1 year to July 7th of 2021. It's just $30 for 1 year. If you want to have a deeper, more longer lasting relationship with our association, which we so hope that you do, at $750 for the lowest level of subscribing life membership. You can pay that now, today, in one payment, or you can pay that over 10 years in subscription. So pay $75 a year for 10 years, or you can do like July and myself and double up when you can. So as always, if you are not here in Houston and you are watching from anywhere in the United States, you can go to the National Association's website at naacp.org, click the Join Us tab, and you'll put your zip code in and it'll find the closest unit to you, and you can join today. But if you're here in Houston, it's naacphouston.org. You can join today for just $30. We would love to have you and bring you into the membership fold with us. Okay, so last week, guys, we talked about elections. We did all things elections for the Texas primary runoff that's taking place next Tuesday. So a week from today is the actual election day for our primary runoff. We're in early voting season right now, so you can vote for 3 more days. You still have until today at 7 p.m. to go vote, or you can all the way through Friday at 7 p.m. So you have 3 more days to vote early, or you can wait until July 14th and go in person. So if you haven't requested a mail-in ballot by now, it's too late. So you're going to have to go vote in person. But like we talked about last week as well, it's super sanitary, very safe. There hasn't been really long lines, so you can get in and get out. And remember, you can go to harrisvotes.com, and that'll give you your polling locations closest to you. And of course, we are Vote Your Way, so you can go anywhere in the county and vote during early voting and also on July 14th. So I encourage you to do that. Also, just one more note for the National Association, if you guys have not seen it, there is a documentary coming out about the life of John Lewis. It's called Good Trouble. The NAACP has partnered with Watch or Event Ive, and they are hosting a pre-screening of the show or of the documentary. You can go to watch.event.org John Lewis, or you can go to the NAACP national website or to their Instagram or Facebook, and you find the link. It's $12 to watch the video or to watch the documentary early, and $5 of that $12 will go to the NAACP. So if you're interested in seeing that documentary, I know I'm going to go watch it, but please make sure you do that. Go view it through the NAACP link, and $5 of that $12 will go back to the association. So, and we're covering all things hurricane preparedness this week. So we're in Hurricane Preparedness Week for the NAACP Houston branch. So make sure you follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, and make sure you see our tips about hurricane preparedness. So we are in hurricane season. Our show is all dedicated to that today. So make sure you check that out. And as always, make sure you go do your census. So census2020.gov, you can log on today, take the next 5 to 7 minutes to get it done, and then come back here, watch our special edition, and figure out exactly what you need to do to be prepared for hurricane season. And the census ties into the funds that we get for disaster recovery. So please complete your census, please go vote, and please go see Good Trouble. And that's all I have, July.
Thank you, Portia, for those announcements and that information about Good Trouble. I'm excited to hear more about that and to watch it. And when did you say it's going to premiere?
You can start watching. I believe it goes live tomorrow, and it's all the way through. Just consistently. So you can go to the website, get the link, pay the $12, and you'll have access to the movie. And they're also doing a panel discussion after that as well. So.
All right. And were there any other, announcements, anything else that we need to remind people about, or is that it?
That is it. But also, if you want to be a volunteer voter deputy registrar, so if you are interested in registering other people to vote, you can go to the Harris Tax Assessor's Office website right now. You can sign up. They're doing virtual VDVR trainings, indefinitely Monday through Saturday throughout the remaining part of the election cycle. So the voter registration deadline for the November general elections isn't until October. So please sign up if you would want to register people to vote in Harris County and then also in the surrounding counties as well.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for tuning in. I'm going to read the bio or just a little bit about today's guest. Paul Goodloe co-hosts Weekend Recharge on weekend mornings from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on the Weather Channel. Goodloe joined the Weather Channel in 1999 after several years as an on-camera weathercaster in St. Louis, here in Houston, as well as in San Luis Obispo. There's my bad pronunciation, but in California. After majoring in geography at the University of Texas at Austin, Goodloe earned his master's degree in climatology at the University of California at Berkeley. Goodloe was born and raised in New Rochelle, New York, about 30 minutes north of New York City in Westchester County. He is a member of the American Meteorology Society, the National Weather Association, and the National Association of Black Journalists, as well as Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Mr. Goodloe was chosen to be featured in the 50 Most Beautiful People issue of People magazine in May 2001. He enjoys skiing, snowboarding, golf, tennis, traveling, and spending time with his wife and 2 kids. Without further ado, I introduce you to Paul Goodloe. Hi.
Hey, good afternoon, July.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. We are excited to have you. We are a hurricane city. And so we just want to make sure that we took the time to really talk to the community about hurricane preparedness. So if you could just jump right on in, tell us what we should be expecting this season with hurricanes.
Well, Houston is certainly no stranger to hurricanes, and I'm not a stranger to Houston as well. I spent a year there working for Fox 26 back in the 90s. And, I was also spent about almost 2 weeks in Texas 3 years ago, coming up on 3 years next month, for Hurricane Harvey. Started in Corpus Christi, close to the landfall point of Harvey. And even then, we knew that the forecast was for Harvey to kind of sit and spin over or pretty much near Houston and could be a flooding disaster. And yes, we're still concerned because it was a strengthening hurricane, small hurricane, but powerful hurricane that was strengthening as it was approaching the Texas coast and did some substantial damage to areas in around Corpus Christi. I can't remember the name of the high school that also got impacted. But that area of the coast hit hard with the direct impact of Harvey. But as Harvey kind of moved inland right over Houston and sat there and spun for days and days and days, and you had a flooding disaster in Houston, I think, if I remember the stat correctly, the elevation change, the topography change between Houston, say, on the north side of town to the Gulf of Mexico, it drops about a foot in elevation every mile. So we're talking, the elevation of Houston is like 50 feet above sea level, and then you got sea level 50 miles farther south. So it's relatively flat. I think the biggest point outside the buildings could be the Ship Channel Bridge on the east side of town. So hills is not something that Houston has. So when you get heavy rain, it sits there. The bayous start to fill, then they start to flood, and you have major flooding going on. That was a big concern that we had 3 years ago, and that's an example of Houston did not get a direct hit from Harvey. You know, it made landfall well south of there along the coast. But hurricanes, I try to focus viewers on this. Hurricanes, tropical storms, they're not single points. Don't get wrapped up in the landfall point. Get wrapped up in the impacts. And we had major impacts with Harvey there in Houston. I mean, come on, in reality, we have a major impact if you have a couple of thunderstorms like we did, 2 weeks ago in parts of Houston with some heavy flooding. So Houston is a very vulnerable city to flooding, whether it's from tropical storms or hurricanes or even from thunderstorms as well. And, you know, Houston is such a large city. It's one of the largest cities in this country. So we have huge millions, I think it's more than 10 million people in the metro area that could be impacted by this. So it doesn't matter what part of town you live in. If you have the wrong thunderstorm dropping the wrong types of rain there. Even last year I was in Houston for tropical storm Imelda that kind of came through there. And there were some flooding. I think parts of east of there, it made landfall closer to Louisiana, but I know parts of Beaumont, parts of the eastern side of the metro area had some flooding as well. And people had that memory from 2 years prior with Harvey. So there were a lot of people on edge about what could happen to that city. So I know the actual biggest worry, the biggest disaster, the ongoing disaster now in Houston is this COVID-19 pandemic. And rightfully so. I mean, that is killing lives left and right. Every single day we have more and more, not only Houstonians, but Texans and Americans dying of this pandemic, which at this point, 3 months ago, we thought would be kind of over by now. But but we're not. So, and I understand that it's hard to take your gaze, your focus off of the out of control train you're on to think about the next one that could be coming over the next 2 or 3 months. And I want to take a minute and share some graphics I have here to hopefully kind of drive this home. So this first graphic you see, this is last year's hurricane season. Pretty active year, but if you kind of notice what's going on here in the U.S., remember locally Imelda, that's the one that gave us some heavy rain, but also that had a lot more flooding on the east side of it, closer to Beaumont, Port Arthur, and those areas. And we had Dorian, which also impacted parts of the East Coast. But you know, that was last year. And every year is certainly different and unique. So here's the forecast for this year. The first column is an average season. So you take the last 30 years. How many named storms, how many hurricanes, how many major hurricanes have we seen? On average, the last 30 years, it's 12 named storms. 6 of those become a hurricane. So a storm gets a name when it becomes 40-mile-per-hour winds between 40 and 74 miles per hour. That's tropical storm range. That's when it gets a name. You have a tropical depression or an invest area, it gets a name when it becomes a tropical storm. When it becomes stronger than 74, then it becomes a hurricane. And we've averaged 6 throughout that last 30 years or so. Category 3 or higher, Category 3, Category 4, Category 5, those are major hurricanes. We average 3 major hurricanes. This doesn't mean that we have, 12 storms hitting the U.S. or 6 hurricanes hitting the U.S. or 3 major hurricanes hitting the U.S. It doesn't mean that at all. That's just the average. Now, there's some researchers and meteorologists with Colorado State University at CSU. They make their own forecast every year, and they're calling for 19 named storms, 19 named storms, 9 of those becoming hurricanes, and 4 of those hurricanes being major hurricanes. So they do a forecast every year, and this is their hurricane forecast. And they sometimes kind of update throughout the year, too, depending on what they've seen so far. And then NOAA, this is the parent organization that where the National Weather Service falls under. They also have their own forecast, and they have more of a broader range, 13 to 19 named storms, 6 to 10 of those becoming hurricanes, and out of those 6 to 10 hurricanes, 3 to 6 becoming major. That's also an above average year. And even the Weather Channel, we've gotten in the game as well in terms of making forecasts. And our forecast is for 18 named storms, 9 of those becoming hurricanes, and 4 of those becoming major hurricanes. So bottom line, the forecast is there for above average year. And so far, we've had 5 named storms. It hasn't really registered a lot on the radar there in Houston in terms of this being big news because you got the pandemic going on, A.
Right.
B, these 5 named storms have mainly been, kind of Gulf and eastward. There's Cristobal, which was in the Gulf, I guess earlier last month. I was in Mobile, Alabama covering that. And it was kind of a rain event, not a huge wind event. It just became a tropical storm, not a hurricane. And then we also had 4 other systems, and one just maybe 2 days ago, one last week before that. So these were kind of East Coast, they kind of formed, and some of them formed offshore and no real impact to land. You're thinking we had 5 named storms. Yeah, we've gone through A, B, C, D, and E named storms. And it's only, the 7th of July.
Right.
So if you think about that, the forecast of an above average year, we're 5 named storms in, and we are 6 weeks into the hurricane season, which is a 6-month-long hurricane season. It goes from June 1st to the end of November. And, I'm not saying that this is the case, but we often look at analogs, like look back in the past at what has happened and maybe see if you have a trend for the future. The last time we had 5 named storms before the 12th of July was back in 2005. And anyone who has been in Houston for...
That's Hurricane Katrina.
That's Hurricane Katrina, but also that is
Rita.
Rita, yes. So Katrina brought a lot of Louisiana residents and New Orleans residents and even Mississippi residents into Houston to live because they didn't have a place to live after Katrina. And then you had Rita the next month. Rita was September 18th to 26th. And I remember that because I still have family and friends and people I went to college with in the Houston area. Everybody was freaking out. And, there were people who died in the evacuation, just trying to leave Houston because it was so...
Right. On what was that? I-45 going to Dallas.
Like a parking lot. You could probably walk faster than people were driving there. People were running out of gas. Tensions are high. And then imagine if you have evacuated New Orleans because of Katrina, wiped out all your belongings and your livelihood and your home. You go to Houston, and then you see another Category 5 hurricane in the Gulf pointed at Houston. Imagine the stress that you're under. So, and we're going to talk about ways to kind of deal with that going forward. But I'm just saying that it's a bad sign that we've had 5 named storms before we had 5 named storms in 2005. So all the tea leaves are reading that, yes, this is going to be or continue to be an above active year. Doesn't mean that we'll have all the impacts in the U.S. or doesn't mean we'll have the impacts in the Houston area at all. But we still have a concern just overall because once you have all that activity, maybe it's, maybe Florida is in play or the East Coast. There are still going to be, especially now during the pandemic, as we all have found out with, things at the grocery store and toilet paper and all strange things that people are panic buying, supplies could be limited because we're in this new COVID-19 era as well. So, I know it's hard to get your mind off the current pandemic disaster we're in across the U.S., especially there in Houston and Texas, but we still have to look, we have to plan. It's all about planning ahead. And even nowadays in the economy, many people have not been working, not be able to work. Some people can't work from home, that they don't have the finances to buy extra supplies or buy a generator. But you still need to have a plan. Whether you go through or buy or pre-purchase these things, you got to have a plan. And some of those plans could be as simple as, I'm not going to, get a hotel in Oklahoma City if a storm approaches Houston. I might go see or have some family friends or family in Lufkin or in, San Antonio that is away from the coast if you happen to live in a flood-prone or storm surge-prone area of the coast. So you don't have to go that far. In fact, you can go from, say, Texas City to, Cypress Creek, if you need to get out of the storm surge. So people have to understand that evacuating and getting out of the hurricane zone doesn't mean that you have to go 40 or 400 miles away. You can go 40 miles away or 60 miles away. Because I want to bring up another graphic here.
You got another graphic? Before we show the graphic, we have one question from Portia. She said, we had an extremely mild winter. Will that increase our likelihood of having hurricanes or tropical storms?
Well, that kind of goes into play with, well, like it's the chicken or the egg. One of the reasons why you had a mild winter was the overall kind of pattern we had, which also allowed the Gulf of Mexico to stay fairly warm. So we're talking record or near record temperatures for this past winter and now spring, and still pretty warm now in the summer in the Gulf of Mexico. So it's basically, that's one of the ingredients that you have for tropical storm and hurricane formation is very warm water, 85 degrees or above. So it's kind of a combination, Portia, where you have the winter helps to keep the Gulf of Mexico very warm, and that is helping if you have enough upper level support, lack of wind shear, winds going too fast as you go through the column in the atmosphere, because again, hurricanes and tropical storms are vertical creatures. So you have strong winds, they can never form, so they kind of blow over and they never, but when you have light wind shear, the storms grow and grow and grow and start to organize and swirl around the center. So you have the warmer waters now that we have in the Gulf and have had for the last 6 months in the Gulf of Mexico. That is definitely helping it, as well as some things like the long range forecast is maybe this is kind of climate terms, a La Nina, but right now we're kind of in a neutral. So it's not really El Nino or La Nina. This neutral phase is also supportive to less wind shear, which I mentioned how these storms, if they have wind shear, they can't grow. Without wind shear, you have the thunderstorms. A tropical storm or a hurricane, nothing but an organized cluster of thunderstorms. So if you have that lack of wind shear, the storms can grow taller and organize.
Okay.
The forecast long-term, perhaps towards the fall, could be what's called the La Nina, which allows some cooler water to be in play farther east in the Atlantic, which also could help stabilize the atmosphere, which allows less wind shear, so it could allow storms to grow and form and organize. So, I mean, it's hard to get a tropical storm and hurricane to organize, but as we all know from the history that we have with tropical storms and hurricanes in Houston, it's not impossible, but it's still difficult. Because I know every single season, people are like, hey, what's wrong with the tropics? The tropics are dead. I'm like, no, the tropics aren't dead. It's still difficult for the atmosphere, for everything to come together at the right time to form these things. They still do. And, you know, that's why people should be grateful that it's quiet for now, because history shows us that it doesn't stay quiet every single year. And, you know, you think about so-called quiet years like it was 1992. That's the year of Hurricane Andrew. Andrew formed in late August, and it's the A name, Andrew. That's the first named storm of the year, and that was a Category 5. So it doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter whether you have like 2005, you have 27 named storms. You ran out of names. We had so many storms that year, which also had, you know, Rita and Wilma and South Florida, as well as Katrina there. But, you know, yes, blockbuster year, record-setting year. But just one hurricane, it's a Cat 5, out of a so-called below-average year, can have, you know, tremendous types of damage and loss of life. So it's not about, yes, the numbers, that means that if we do have a lot of storms impacting us, we probably could have a lot of storms impacting us. So supplies could be worn thin. Government response can be worn thin, even more so this year, and even local governments. There's so many things in play that, you know, I really hope and pray that we don't have a lot of impacts in the U.S., because just trying to keep people safe and eventually long-term making people whole from their losses that could be incurred, it's a real big concern. I mean, this is strange days we're living in, but also unprecedented times. The economic kind of barrel we could be over. It's kind of scary if, you know, some of these worst case or near worst case scenarios come through, that there's so many people hurting right now then you don't need Mother Nature to throw
And
in.
you put a layer of storms. We have another question. This one's from Damali. She asks, what months do we usually have the strongest hurricanes?
Usually August and September. But like Rita was late September, but then we had Wilma, which devastated South Florida. Before it devastated South Florida, I've a lot of people there in Houston area. I probably vacationed in Cancun. Some of the beautiful beaches there were, maybe, I don't know, 20, 30 yards wide, as in, from the resort property to the ocean. But Wilma sat over that part of the Yucatan for a couple of days and just destroyed those beaches and destroyed a lot of property before it eventually moved out and in the Gulf and moved to South Florida. So, and that storm was in October. So hurricane season happens or officially is June 1st through November 30th. That's just a season, saying, it's not like baseball season where you have a start date and an end date in the World Series. It's what people put on it. I'm like, hey, it's summertime, but I'm pretty sure Houston's had plenty of 95-degree days in spring. So 95s aren't just limited to summertime. Hurricanes, tropical storms aren't just limited to the season that man has put on there. So, in fact, we've seen 2 named systems of tropical storms before
June 1st.
Yeah. So the official season is 6 months long. The peak of the season is really ramping up in mid-August, goes to the end of September. But we've had some pretty nasty storms in October as well.
Okay. Thank you for that question, Damali. So I'm going to bring your graphic back up.
Okay. And let me go to the next graphic here, because this shows you some of the concerns we have with hurricanes. Because people think, oh, yeah, it's Category 5. Look at all the winds, 155 mile per hour winds. But look at the depths associated with winds. Again, this is data, ends at 2012, so we could perhaps update some of the flooding depths. Probably has grown because of things like Harvey and even other hurricanes as well. But the wind, the percentage of deaths in a hurricane from wind, not nearly as high. We're talking it's even 20% of some of the others, like storm surge. So the biggest concern we have in terms of getting people or keeping people safe is storm surge, number one. People think about Katrina, all the flooding in New Orleans, but have you seen what happened on the Mississippi coast? Have you seen what happened on the Alabama coast?
Right.
I remember covering a hurricane after Katrina on the Pacific coast years later, and I'm across the street from the beach. I'm in a hotel, and I'm looking up, and it must be maybe a 12-foot ceiling, and 2 feet from the top of the ceiling is the high water line for Katrina. Again, I'm in a building across the street. I'm probably maybe 300 yards from the water's edge. I mean, I'm a good ways away from the water, and I'm up a good ways too. So I've got to, walk downhill from the parking lot, cross the road, then down some steps to get to the beach, and then still walk to get to the water. So, some of the storm surge there was some areas 25, 30 feet. So that's just the physical rise of water with this hurricane coming in. There are parts of the Mississippi coast which were literally wiped off the map. Homes were wiped from the foundation. All you saw were slabs. So while people always think and associate Katrina with New Orleans, don't get me wrong, it was bad. A lot of people lost their lives in New Orleans with that flooding. That was more of the levees breaking, kind of a man-made disaster going on there. This was a Mother Nature disaster along the Mississippi coast, and even the Alabama coast had major storm surge, and homes were just wiped off their foundation there because the ocean just rose so much. And then you had waves on top of the storm surge. So storm surge is still the leading cause of death in hurricanes. And then number 2 is flooding. And we know in Houston, because of Harvey, before Harvey, there was a tropical storm Allison. So, you don't have to have Category 5 hurricanes. You can just have a slow-moving or stalled hurricane or remnants of a hurricane or a tropical storm, like it did in Houston, dump rain day after day after day after day after day. So these are the things you have to worry about and pay attention to the forecast. If it's a major hurricane with big storm surge, then you need to pull away from the coast. You need to find out, as all this information is available from your local emergency managers, where the evacuation zones are, mainly because first of storm surge. So you pull out. So you leave, Galveston, or you leave, Lamarck, and you head to, the Woodlands. So you
Right.
have that storm surge zone. But then,
So about that,
okay.
about moving around when the news is saying there's going to be a major storm surge, right? A lot of people are new to Texas. We have thousands of people who moved to Houston like in a week, right? And that's why our population is so out of control. But so if I'm new to Texas, I moved to Pearland. A lot of people have no idea how close Pearland is to the water, because they think it's down in Galveston, and really, no, Angleton is there. So I'm so glad that you're saying these things, just to put it in context for people who are watching, how close we are to the water.
And most people have, a smartphone. So all you got to do is pull up, your Google Maps, and you can see where you are in relation to where the ocean is. And, Houston is, again, relatively flat. If you're, someone who runs, you never run over a hill. You can run a long time and have no end. But runners love running in Houston because it's relatively so flat. That's also, when it comes to hurricanes and storm surge or flooding, double-edged sword there. So you can get great exercise and run for a long, long time, but storm surge or flooding comes in, it's a big concern. So find out where you are. Talk to your neighbors. Texas, I've met, I used to live in Texas, a lot of friendly people in Texas, even during COVID-19. So, and that's the one thing about, I've learned, not just there in Texas, but across this country. When there's a disaster going on or imminent, people come together. People are willing to help each other. Strangers are willing to help each other, which, in light of all the crazy things that still goes on in this country, from when I'm in these situations and I see strangers helping strangers, it's comforting. It lets you know that, deep inside, there is a lot of good in humans and helping out their fellow human being, just because they know their need and they know it's the right thing to do. So, ask your neighbors, don't be afraid to call up local emergency managers. That's what their job is, to educate people on the dangers and when to evacuate. I don't know if there's still a lot of phone books now. I know back in the day, I'm dating myself, in the phone books, they would have evacuation zones, but phone books are so kind of hard to find nowadays. I don't think you can print them. So, find out who your local emergency manager is. You can call the non-emergency number for even the police department to find out what county you're in, and then try to track down the local county emergency manager. There's all types of ways that you can find out where you live and what type of danger you could be in. But, to avoid the massive evacuation like we had when Rita was approaching, you don't have to go 250 miles away to get out of things. The flooding is something that, pay attention to your local meteorologist, the Weather Channel. We were forecasting, I remember before Harvey, some models were printing out, 15, 19, 20 inches of rain. That's mind-blowing, that type of rain. But here's the thing. It was more than twice that amount of rain in some places.
Right.
So, we're fairly good in what we do for a living, forecasting the weather. But, sometimes Mother Nature's like, yeah, you haven't seen this. And to put this in perspective, and even talking about the earlier question about the mild winter, climate change is a real thing. Some people talk about, I don't believe in climate change. Saying you don't believe in something scientific is saying, I don't believe in gravity, I'm going to jump and stay in the air. No, you're not. Gravity is a fact. If I take this piece of paper, it's going to drop because gravity is a fact. Climate change is a fact. There's no political angle I'm trying to run here. I'm a scientist. Listen to scientists. This also goes hand in hand with the COVID-19 pandemic. Don't look on some random Facebook posting by someone you went to high school with about the truth of. Listen to the scientists. They kind of know what's going on. Oh, well, this says that I could die from my own carbon dioxide and put this mask on. Really? I mean, is this true scientific data? Listen to the scientists who are trying to protect you. So when it comes to even the weather forecast, look, the models we get that kind of help us predict the weather, predict hurricanes or tropical storms, that's public information. So anyone can go online and find the model, say, oh, well, this one is spinning up a hurricane that's approaching Houston, on July 24th. Yeah, a model could say that. But how long have you been looking at that model? What do the other models say? So, listen to the scientists, listen to the real meteorologists. Don't listen to social meteorologists, because there's plenty out there, and they'll start, with their outlandish kind of claims of what they think is going to happen. That's great. So, how did you come to this? Or you have to look at one model, which is, 18 days out. And most meteorologists who are worth their salt will tell you that 3 days out, we're pretty much spot on. 5 days out, we can kind of tell trends. You start talking about 7-10 day forecasts and beyond, you take a coin and flip that. You can kind of forecast how many times you'll see heads or tails versus how many times you can get a 10-day or a 14-day forecast dead on. That's just, it's not very accurate there. So, the science shows us that, our climate is warming. You are putting heat, which is a form of energy, into the atmosphere, which is actually making our lower atmosphere even thicker. So we can have taller clouds, we can have even wilder fluctuations in our weather thanks to climate change. So we are stacking the deck, we're adding more energy to get wilder equations, which just doesn't mean, we're going to have nothing but mild winters for the rest of, forever in Houston. It also could mean that, we could have blocking ridges, perhaps farther west, which could make them mild, which also allows, it's like atmosphere's like a seesaw. You push up in one area, you got to push down the other. And I push down, big blue northers down through Texas multiple times during the winter, and you could have a record cold winter. So climate change in a warming world does not mean only beach weather or massive heat waves for everyone. It is a disruption in what our typical or past climate has been for not just, 2 or 3 years, for the last 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 years. We're seeing climate shifts. So it's not just weather changes day to day, year to year, but decade to decade, that's more of a climate. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing shifts in climate. More prolonged droughts. So it's more prolonged and deeper heat waves and longer heat waves. Perhaps, and even things like snowstorms. You could have let's go to the Rocky Mountains. You can have average or above average years of snow. But if half that snow falls in April versus, say, January and February, that's a huge impact on people's livelihood. Perhaps you're, plowing snow or, running a ski resort. People are not, or you're renting a house at a ski resort. People can't go, in April. You're thinking about going to the beach or going to play golf.
Right.
So
even the economic impacts.
Right. So, I mean, the average snowfall could stay the same, but now it shifts on when that snow falls, so or perhaps, ranchers are having their livestock, calving out, and you have a big snowstorm and you got a big deep freeze. It's happened before, where the calves have died because it's been too cold, or you got 3 feet of snow covering up whatever feed that they have out there, or hay or grass. So, there are a lot more impacts that people don't think about when the numbers say the snow is average. No, it's different time.
It's different types.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's what I'm talking about. Scientists deal with data, and it's not just climate. You want to come back to COVID-19. Listen to the scientists.
So speaking of COVID-19, and you kind of touched on it earlier, and I do want us to look at it. Being in a pandemic, in hurricane season, in a Gulf state that sees hurricanes quite regularly, and here's a question. This question is from someone from Chicago. I know her, right? But what recommendations of items do you consider that we should keep handy?
Well, you talk about in light of the pandemic too. So, an easy thing would be if you know that you can even, if you know you're safe enough, you're outside the surge zone, if you have enough elevation to perhaps not worry about the flood zone, something like a generator, because most likely power is going to go out. I know power has gone out even for some people for weeks with Harvey. Even a few days is an inconvenience, because also you got to remember that hurricane season happens in the summer, in the hotter months. And trust me, I've covered plenty of hurricanes where I've had no power, which means no air conditioning, and it's the hurricane might have passed, but it's still 90 degrees. It's 72-degree dew point, so it's air you can wear. There's no relief from it except maybe getting your car, but you got to make sure you have gas for that. But to have the simple creature comforts like being able to cook your food, to charge all your devices, to maybe even run a microwave or run a refrigerator. You can do that with a generator. And I know these days people don't have that much discretionary income with this COVID-19 pandemic kind of sapping a lot of even little savings that people have out here just to survive. But if you do have the money to do that, a generator is a great thing to do. We can always take it with us if we go on a barbecue, go to the beach. We can have that power. If we go tailgating, if we ever have football again in your tailgate, that's something you can kind of bring with you and get some use out of it. Just make sure you use it a couple of times a year so it's still up and running. So when you finally do need it, whether it's a hurricane or some other flood disaster, that it's there, because it's much easier to find that generator now on July 7th than it would be, say, 5 days before a hurricane's approaching the coast.
Right.
Let alone maybe 2 days before the hurricane's approaching. You might go to your local home improvement store. You might find one, or you might not, or it might be perhaps double the price.
Right.
A lot more expensive than it is right now. So, that's one of the in our so connected society that we're in, a generator would be a great investment. And a lot of them you can actually just sit there and maybe run once a year or maybe twice a year, and it's good for 10, 15 years. So this could be a long-term kind of investment, and you can get some. I'm pretty sure for just a couple of $100, a small enough one to at least make you feel comfortable. Maybe you can run a fan, maybe not a whole house air conditioner, but enough to perhaps take the edge off the pretty bad conditions you might find yourself in if you have a major hurricane or storm impact the area. Other things like food, water. Water is easy to get. A lot of people only drink bottled water now. I don't know why, but you could also kind of take an edge off that kind of cost of keep buying bottled water, and then you have the pollution aspect of the plastic bottles. Just buy you can do a reverse osmosis filter for your home. Mm-hmm. So the water is going to work, but if you have a kind of a passive filter where you turn the tap on and it goes through the filter and out of the faucet, then you have kind of a not quite limitless, but you have a decent backup supply of drinking water there in your house. If you do that without having to worry about stacking up, or am I going to fill all these bottles and I got to worry about the expiration date of the water? Everything has an expiration date now. And then food, it's pretty perishable, so if you can stand the prepackaged food, they usually can last a year or two on the shelf, some. But generator and a way to have drinking water, because nowadays, especially with the kids, you got to have them entertained with some tablet device or something, or so you have the power for that. You can charge your devices, and you need drinking water.
What about? I saw people do this prior to. Well, Yeah, prior to Harvey, but we saw it all throughout Harvey, where people had canoes, they had little floats, blow up things, and of course, boats.
Well, if you flood it with Harvey, you probably want to have something like that nearby as like a last ditch resort. Ideally, you would evacuate because typically, you know, a lot of people were told to evacuate ahead of the flooding that hit with Harvey. Some had very little warning. I mean, you know.
Yeah, because some areas flooded that hadn't seen flooding before. So, like, I live in a unique part of town where I know it's going to flood every time, but it's not so much the neighborhood that floods, it's the bayou, so the area closest to the bayou. But with Harvey, for the first time, we saw the water like creeping, where it was a threat to the neighborhood. So maybe I need to go buy a little canoe.
You know, it's like insurance. You know, you pay some money for it, but you really hope you don't use it, because if you end up using it, it's going to cost you a lot more in the long run. So, but you know, you don't want to. But also, like insurance, you certainly, you know, don't want to be in a situation where you need it and don't have it. So if, you know, if you're in an area that you know that does flood, and these things could happen quickly, flash flooding happens in a flash, perhaps overnight, you don't want to be stranded with your family in the house, you want to have a way to get out safely, then yeah, it wouldn't be a bad investment. I'm not saying everyone should go out and buy one. I'm really saying that, you know, you should know where you live. You should know whether you live in a flood area. You should know whether you're called for evacuation, because, you know, outside of the occasional thunderstorm that pops up and it's hard to predict, it just sitting there and dumping 3 inches of rain in, you know, 90 minutes. Most things like tropical activity, we know it's coming. You're giving some warning and evacuate, because, you know, yes, we have a lot of things. We got, you know, great pictures and memories and stuff. It'll be tough if you lose that. But what about the people in those pictures? Those are the things that are irreplaceable. So, you know, I don't care if you have to evacuate 10 times and 10 times you feel like you wasted your time. I'd rather do that than come in a situation where, well, it never happened before, and then you're kind of stuck out. And you look at, you know, your family, and you're like, I've put these people in harm's way. And you know, this is not just a Houston thing. This is a national thing. I've talked to people with Hurricane Sandy in New Jersey. They had massive storm surge with that storm. That was another October storm as well. You know, the year before that, they had a storm that threatened the same region. They called for massive evacuations across the Jersey Shore, across Long Island, Manhattan. And the storm kind of strengthened after it made landfall, did massive damage inland, places of Vermont, New Hampshire, massive flooding. These beautiful covered bridges were washed out. But it was kind of a dud in terms of the impacts that were talked about on the coast. So you fast forward a year, people are like, hey, last year nothing really happened. I wasted my time. I couldn't get back into my house for 3 days. The cops wouldn't let me in because we're still in evacuation zone. Everything was fine. So yeah, Sandy came. I wasn't leaving. There's no way, because it took me so long to get back in. There's no way I'm leaving. The same person told me that he lived in a 2-story house, got a renter downstairs. He's upstairs. Here's a knock on his door. It's his renter. He's like, I need some help. And we're talking about, and he looks down, he sees water coming up the stairs. The water had already come in the first floor of his house. So he helped his downstairs renter up to his second floor. They closed the door, thinking they'll be okay, because now they're, 15 feet above, you know, the ground level. And all of a sudden he starts hearing banging, 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 you know, on the side of his house. He goes to the window, and again, he lived across the street from a marina, and he sees a boat banging in the side of his house because the water problem had happened. And, you know, he said he wasn't very religious before then, but he found it in Jesus then, because he really thought he was going to die. You know, think about that. You're seeing a boat knocking on the side on your window, and you're on the second story, and you thought you'd be fine. You had never seen the water that high and the storm surge that high, but it happened then. And, you know, afterwards he said, yeah, you know, I'm lucky to be alive. if anything ever threatens this area again, I'm out. I never want to live through another night like that for as long as I live. So, you know, a lot of people were able to, you know, fortunately live through that and have that experience to teach them, but a lot of people were not. A lot of people, you know, didn't evacuate, didn't heed the warnings, and, you know, people think it's dramatic, and they first responders would tell you just write your name, your next of kin on your forearm, so when we find your body, we know how to identify you.
With a Sharpie.
With a Sharpie, right?
Yeah, and that's serious. Growing up in Florida, I've heard that. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, look, you evacuate, okay, you waste your time, but you didn't waste your life. Or, you know, and if you're that stubborn, send everyone else out, and then you stay. Just be one person, and don't call for help. Because guess what? The first responders have, you know, husbands and wives and children, you know, and you're trying to bring them out in the elements that you should have been going out. So, you know, understand that, you know, when people and authorities ask you, or there is no mandatory, as in they will pull you out of your house type evacuations. That just doesn't exist in this country, because it's America, freedoms. But also understand that if you choose to avoid the so-called mandatory evacuations, that you're not going to be able to call at the last minute. You know, that happened with Rita on the Bolivar Peninsula. And I remember that vividly because I think it was the year before that, I happened to be down there, and I took the ferry from Galveston across, and I'm looking out, and I'm like, it was a good distance between that road and the surf line, but I could see that right under some homes. And I'm like, oh my goodness, if this place ever got hit with a storm with a major surge, these homes would be wiped out. And they were.
And they were. I see you have another graphic here, so I'm gonna bring it up.
Right. So, you know, we're in strange days now. So, you know, some of this is just common sense, but it's always important to kind of remind people that during a hurricane, during the pandemic, shelters used to be the first line of kind of refuge for people. Now you got COVID-19, and I know from dealing with tropical storms earlier this year that people have made some changes. They're going to have, you know, temperature checks as you approach a shelter. If you are positive with COVID-19, they will have, most places will have at least one shelter for people who are positive for COVID-19 to perhaps reduce that community spread. And, you know, so if you don't want to go in that shelter for fear of catching or giving or transmitting COVID-19, think about going to a friend's house or a relative's house, you know, that is out of the surf zone, out of the flood zone, so you don't have to travel that far, don't have to, you know, be subject to random people that you don't know. And from my time in Mobile last month, covering Tropical Storm Cristobal, I was shocked and dismayed by the lack of masks that I saw in and around Mobile. It was shocking.
And they have high numbers.
They do now, right? This was
wow,
in June, and it was, you know, my crew. I had a Northeast crew. I had someone from New Jersey, someone from Philadelphia, and you know, and I live in Atlanta, and we all had masks on, and we looked like we had three heads, because, you know, we were the odd men out for sure, literally there. But it's, you know, it's COVID-19 is real, as we know that right now in Houston. Also, think about the elderly members and friends. You know, they want to, or they're hopefully trying to limit their exposure. So if you have time, it's all about preparing. Go get them supplies. If you know they're safe, their house is safe, out of the surge zone, out of the flood zone, make sure they have food and water and supplies, batteries for flashlights. Maybe even if they can afford it, you can go buy a generator, share a generator with them. But you want to limit their exposure, because they definitely are in that kind of target zone that COVID-19 has been hitting hard. And then now's the time to make sure that you have good insurance. Take pictures. You can do something as simple as, you know, taking your smartphone and walking around and showing, okay, I got a Sony this, got a Hitachi this, HP computer. You know, all that can be looked at if you do suffer a loss, to try to make you whole with your insurance. But also know it takes a while for flood insurance to go into effect. And even contacting your insurance person will let you know whether you actually live in a flood zone, and if you qualify to get flood insurance. And I know a lot of people in Houston with Harvey, the Houston area, were told that they don't live in a floodplain, but let alone they didn't know that the Army Corps would do certain things, trying to alleviate flooding other areas and flood areas that, were never even on a flood map, and they suffered flood losses. So I don't know. I saw a lot of that firsthand out west of downtown, also out towards Katy as well. A couple of years ago, that was just.
Is there another slide? Yeah.
Yes, there's one more. And it's a big concern that, we say to prepare all the time, but we also know that money is in short supply. Yeah, I just saw some headline that there might be another stimulus check coming for some Americans, which would be great to, help them out there. But if you can work at home or from home, or if you transition to working from home, use the time that we have at home to make sure that your house is fortified. Make sure that you seal up any cracks, and look around your house for trees. There are a lot of pine trees in the Houston area, kind of softwood, so they kind of break and splinter pretty quickly if they're old or diseased. It also costs money to have trees taken down, but you might think about that. You'd rather take, $1,000 to take this tree down versus, my deductible, my homeowners is $1,500. So a little bit now could save you a lot of headache later in terms of what you might have to be dealing with. And also, I think I have one more slide. There we go. I do, but it's not. Let me see if I can get to it.
While you get that, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you're sharing this live while Paul is pulling up the other slide. Make sure you're sharing this live because this is really good information. And we have some things in the works that we will be sharing in the coming weeks. But this week is Hurricane Prep Week here at the Houston branch NAACP. And so follow us daily for best practices to prepare for hurricane readiness. All right, I see the next slide.
Yeah, here's the thing. This is the 7th day of July. This is a 6-month long hurricane season, so we are barely scratching the surface. So you think, I mentioned earlier, the peak of hurricane season really is kind of early, mid-September, but it really starts to ramp up as we get into next month and really goes through much of mid-October as well. So even though we've had 5 named storms at a record-setting pace in terms of seeing named storms, although no major impacts to the U.S. yet, at least 2 landfalls, but no major impacts and no hurricanes yet, we still have 96% of the hurricane season to get through in terms of where most of the activity is. So it's not unusual to still be quiet and somewhat unimpactful weather at this point, but there's so much more to go. That's kind of saying, hey, I ran that last mile in 4 minutes and 50 seconds. That's great. But guess what? It's a marathon. We still got, 26.2 miles of the marathon. You still got 25 miles to go. That's basically what we have here in the hurricane season. Yes, we had a lot of activity, but we have a bunch of the heart of when things typically occur and form and threaten land and threaten the U.S. to go. So, we have so many things, in the air right now, juggling school, when or if will school start for our kids? Where will the next meal come from? Because where's my next paycheck coming from? Do I get some relief from the government? I got this pandemic thing to worry about, keeping everyone healthy. And it's hurricane season. So this is one more thing that could be neglected, but hopefully, it's just another way to prepare. And maybe you can't prepare until you actually have a threat on your doorstep. And that's understandable. But if it is on your doorstep, you got to take action. If they tell you to, you got to, because there's a lot of people losing their lives because A, they're uninformed, and then the big concern now is B, that we're in dire straits as a nation dealing with this COVID-19. So ideally, everything goes out to sea and we don't have anything threatening land. That would be great, especially this year.
Right.
With this forecast being well above average and already on a very above average pace, I'm really concerned for a lot of people within 100 miles of the Gulf Coast of the Atlantic coast this year.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking this hour with us. And I know that this is time that you could have been spending with your family. So we thank you for spending with our family, the Houston community. Is there any one last thing you want to leave the audience with today?
Just prepare, and I wish everyone the best in this current ongoing disaster, and all the best in this upcoming hurricane season as well.
Okay. And where can they follow you on social media? Do you use social media?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook as well. So just search.
Okay, perfect.
Hopefully I'll pop up.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully you don't have to come here to cover a hurricane. You'll just be coming for a vacation to catch up with old friends from UT.
That would be great. And hopefully that maybe a football season, we can go see a football game this fall.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that, but yeah. But thank you so much. And we would love to have you come back to join us. And if you do have to come here for a hurricane, you can always count on the NAACP as family for you. We'll find you some good food and some good people to keep you company.
My pleasure to join you guys, and thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you so much, and you have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, folks, that's it. I'm going to bring Portia in. That was fantastic talking with Mr. Goodloe today. All right, Portia.
It was a lot. I feel so much smarter now and so much more informed about all things weather. But that's just, I mean, we were talking about it before, and when we've been doing all of our hurricane preparedness kind of, dialogues around what we're going to do for the branch, just realizing like, we had a really mild winter, and, we've hit 100 degrees, like, I don't know how many times already this year. And it just feels like one of those years, everything else is going on. We just gonna have to pray to the good Lord, like, please don't.
And we got to use our common sense.
And use our common sense. So we're going to be coming out with more tips, but like Mr. Goodloe said, start fortifying your house if you have the ability to, looking at trees, looking at filling in gaps in walls, cracks, whatever it is, whatever you can do now, and then just make an evacuation plan. Right. So I really like that he emphasized, like, you don't have to drive, you don't have to go all the way to Dallas, you don't have to go all the way to Oklahoma City. If you're somewhere, it's a little dicey here in Houston because you don't know which area is going to be okay and which isn't going to be okay. But I think that, he gave some really great advice about, just getting out of the surge areas if you can.
Absolutely. Well, we just want to continue to encourage you all to follow us daily on social media, whether it's here on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. We are publishing tips every day this week. We started yesterday, and the last day will be Saturday, where we give you suggestions and about preparing for hurricane season. Also, like Mr. Goodloe said, check on your neighbors, especially the elderly people in your family and community, and maybe assist them in their hurricane plan. So maybe it's picking up water for them each time you buy water for yourself. Someone came to mind for me who isn't a neighbor, but is someone who's like family that doesn't drive, and I want to make sure that they're taken care of. So I'll start picking up supplies for them as I pick up my own. And I encourage you all to do the same. Go ahead, Portia.
One more thing I forgot. So today our National Economic Development Department, along with several other organizations, we're doing the Buy Black Day or Blackout Tuesday.
Oh yeah, blackout.
So we're not supposed to buy anything today if you can, but if you do buy, Black owned, if you have to. So I forgot to mention that earlier, and it just came to my mind before we got off the show. So we're only 2:30, so we still got a long way to go for the day. So if you have not bought anything today, don't buy anything. And if you have to, if you're going to get something to eat for dinner, try to go to a Black owned restaurant or business.
Yeah. And you should continue that. as much as you can. Make it, be intentional about it. So we thank you all for tuning in today. Thank you, Portia, for your contribution as always.
Thank you.
Love having you be my other half for all that we do for NAACP. You're a great partner to have. And also, I want to thank Mr. Goodloe again and the Weather Channel for all that they do and for him taking the time out to visit with us, as well as our team. There's a whole team that puts this production together every week. And I just want to make sure that you all don't think it's just Portia and I, because it's not. So shout out to our team. That's Andre, Nick, Damali, Tangi, Shamira, Bianca, Miss Yolanda, everybody. Thank you for your help. And a special shout out to Damali for using her resources to help us secure Mr. Goodloe for today's broadcast. Yes. So again, thank you so much. There is no community regular broadcast tomorrow. We are taking the week off. We are tired. We've been doing this every week since April, late April. And it's a great show. And we know that it serves a very great purpose, and we will continue it even when outside reopens. We will continue it probably at a different time, but we will continue this contribution to the community because we see the effects of it. But just no show tomorrow. We need to take a little break, and we'll be back with you all next week on Wednesday at 4:30. And this show will re-air
tomorrow. Yes. Don't forget, if you have not voted yet, go vote. We have 3 days left, including today, and then election day for the 2020 primary election runoff here in Texas is on Tuesday, July 14th. It's a very special day for me, so that's what I want for you guys to do on the 14th is to go out and vote.
Go vote. So thank you all so much for tuning in, and we will see you next Wednesday. Have a good one.
Bye, guys.